Hello everyone, it's me, Clayton. I just got back from seeing Lee Winnell's The Invisible Man, starring Elizabeth Moss. Now, when it comes to Universal's other big films of the horror genre and their attempts to recreate their classic monster films, many people will point to their 2017 film The Mummy, starring Tom Cruise. But that film was an absolute disaster and it basically killed the Dark Universe dead in its tracks before it could even begin. But this film ends up being much smaller in scale, much more terrifying in tone, and has a real message to it that lets Universal know this is how you do your remakes. So let's get to the story, shall we? The story is that Elizabeth Moss plays Cecilia, a woman who is going through an abusive relationship with a brilliant scientist named Adrienne. When she happens to escape her assailant, and it seems like Adrienne has committed suicide. Elizabeth Moss believes he's still out there, but that he's managed to find a way to turn himself invisible so he can continue tormenting her. Everyone thinks she's crazy, and she has to find a way to prove that this is not all in her head, as she knows that Adrienne is still out there and he's ready to strike at any moment. That's all I'll say about the story without spoiling anything. So, the thing that makes this movie work is that it's very efficient with its budget, and it's very efficient with its scenes. The film only cost $7 million to make, and a lot of it doesn't rely on special effects at all, mostly just relying on the actors' talent and the tension to settle in for many scenes. There are several scenes when there's really nothing there, and Elizabeth Moss is just freaking out to get us to see what she's going through. And focusing on her trauma and focusing on her experiences is what makes the film work. You don't see the actual abuse that caused her to act this way, but you get a good sense of what happened. It doesn't sensationalize what happened. It uses that as context for her behavior and how she goes throughout the film. As such, Elizabeth Moss is a very sympathetic character throughout as Cecilia. She manages to essentially have every single role that her character type would have throughout. From the shrieking damsel to the abuse survivor to the eventual hero. Adrienne, on the other hand, does feel like he's a little underdeveloped. He does make for a rather threatening bad guy, but you actually don't get to see him that often, both figuratively and literally. And when he finally does happen to reveal his true self, he does feel a little one-dimensional. Not bad per se, but I think fleshing him out a little bit more would have made him all the more disturbing. But the other characters also do fill in their own roles pretty well, whether it's Cecilia's sister Emily, or Cecilia's friend James, his young teenage daughter Sydney. They all feel like real people and not just character types. Another thing that makes the film work is the cinematography and how they handle the scares. It's not all jump scares that try to get a scream out of the audience. There's a lot of long takes. A lot of the cinematography is focused on getting you to be as tense as possible, and it gets you really well into Elizabeth Moss's mindset, to the point where when there are a few action scenes that do take place, they feel extremely brutal, rather shocking, and quite inventive when it comes to the various sequences that are involved there. And they don't take away from the tension at all. In fact, the final scene of the film, without spoiling it, ended up being totally the opposite of how I expected the ending to go. But it's also done in a very satisfying way, so I actually consider it one of the more subversive endings that I've seen for a horror film of this type. So, overall, The Invisible Man happens to be a great example of what happens when you have a great director and a great actor and you just let them do what they need to do. When you give them that kind of creative freedom, you get amazing horror films like this. So I'm going to give The Invisible Man a 9 out of 10. See you next time.